Have you ever stopped to wonder why you keep sabotaging your own life? Not in big, cinematic ways, but in the quiet, invisible moments. When you scroll instead of sleep. When you say, "I'm fine," instead of asking for help. When you stay in a room, a job, a relationship, long after your soul has checked out. It's strange, isn't it? How most of us are haunted by problems we can't quite name. We're not in danger, we're not starving, but we wake up with a tightness in our chest, and we don't know why. So let's get real. This isn't a motivational video. This is a mirror, because the truth is, the most powerful prison you'll ever face is the one you built inside your own mind. 1. You want freedom, but you fear responsibility. It's a strange paradox. You crave control over your life. Yet, the moment you're handed the reins, you freeze. Why? Because freedom without discipline is chaos, and deep down, you know it. 2. You're addicted to comfort. You call it self-care, but often it's escape. Plato once said, "The first and greatest victory is to conquer yourself." But how do you conquer what you never confront? 3. You wear masks so well, you forgot who you are underneath. Your smile at work, your small talk, your curated online self. You've become so good at pretending, you've started believing the act. 4. You secretly hope someone will save you. A partner, a mentor, a moment of divine intervention, but no one's coming. As Nietzsche said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." The question is, what's your why? Let me tell you a story. In 1943, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a German theologian, was arrested for resisting the Nazis. From a prison cell, he wrote that one of the deadliest evils wasn't hatred, but stupidity. He wasn't talking about intelligence. He meant moral blindness, the inability of people to think for themselves, to question the lies they're fed, to resist conformity. He saw it all around him, and he knew most people would rather follow the crowd off a cliff than face the discomfort of independent thought. Sound familiar? 5. You don't really want truth. You want reassurance. When something challenges your beliefs, you label it toxic or negative. But not everything uncomfortable is harmful. Growth hurts. That's why most people never do it. 6. You chase validation more than meaning. You scroll for likes, not insight. You speak to be heard, not understood. You care more about being seen than seeing clearly. 7. You think you're self-aware, but you only listen to yourself through a filter. Every time you reflect, you're editing the story, protecting your ego, justifying your flaws. That's not self-awareness. That's self-deception in disguise. Carl Jung warned, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." So here's an uncomfortable truth. You are the source of most of your problems. Not your past, not your parents, not your boss or the system or your zodiac sign. You. And that's liberating, because if you are the problem, then you can also be the solution. 8. You keep saying, "I'll change," but change demands sacrifice. You want a new life without letting go of the old one. But progress doesn't come without grief. You have to bury the person you were to become the person you need to be. 9. You confuse activity with progress. You stay busy. You chase goals. But deep down, you're running in circles, like a hamster on a wheel, congratulating yourself for your hustle, while going nowhere. 10. You fear stillness. Silence terrifies you. Because when the noise fades, your thoughts get loud. And that's when the real war begins. Let's zoom out. In the Republic, Plato describes the allegory of the cave. Prisoners, chained since birth, see shadows on a wall and think that is reality. One escapes, sees the real world, and returns to free the others. But they hate him for it. They're more comfortable with illusion than truth. Now ask yourself, what cave are you still sitting in? What shadow are you still mistaking for truth? 11. You're terrified of being alone, not because you love people, but because you don't love yourself. Solitude doesn't hurt when you're at peace. It only hurts when you're trying to avoid yourself. 12. You wait for motivation, but discipline doesn't wait. Real growth starts when you act without feeling ready, when you move before you're inspired, when you show up even when you don't want to. 13. You talk about potential like it's a promise, but it's a threat. The bigger your potential, the heavier your responsibility. And every day you delay becoming who you could be, you waste something sacred. Here's a gut punch. You are not as good as you think you are. You're not as kind, not as deep, not as wise. But that's okay. Awareness is the first step toward becoming. It's better to know you're asleep than to dream you're awake. Let's dive deeper. Why do so many people repeat the same patterns, even when they know better? Because knowledge doesn't change people. Pain does. Transformation doesn't come from books or videos or journaling. It comes when life breaks you open and you decide not to seal the cracks. It's in that darkness, that unbearable space between who you are and who you could be, that real growth begins. 14. You think suffering is a sign something's wrong, but often it means you're finally facing what's real. Growth isn't a straight line. It's a spiral, returning to the same pain each time with deeper understanding. 15. You envy people who took risks, but you forget their bravery started where your excuses begin. They weren't ready. They were just willing. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you felt proud of yourself? Not for a win or an achievement or praise, but for doing something hard and honest and necessary, something that made your soul a little quieter? Because that's what you're really seeking. Not more money, not more followers, but a moment of inner stillness, a life you can respect, a self you can live with. So here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people don't fear death. They fear a meaningless life. They fear living without ever waking up, without ever doing something that mattered, without ever facing themselves, and finally changing. And that fear, it's the doorway to everything you've been avoiding. So, where do you go from here? You could click away, scroll to the next distraction, forget this video in 5 minutes, or you could stop, take a breath, and ask yourself, what am I pretending not to know? What pain am I hiding behind convenience? And what would my life look like if I actually showed up for it? You don't need to change overnight, but you do need to choose between the life you tolerate and the life that's waiting on the other side of your excuses. You've been asleep long enough.